welcome to the A11y Conference, and we have our first panel today. We are going to be joined by Charlie Carr. Charlie Carr is a disability rights professional and activist. We are also going to be joined by Laurie Hanin. Hi, Laurie. It's so amazing to see you here. Laurie is the executive director of the Center for Hearing and Communication, and we are going to be joined. Whoa, this is a big one, guys. We are going to be joined by Professor Karen. Should we refer to you as Karen or Professor Karen? Karen. We are going to be joined today by Karen, who is from the Robert and Colleen Haas Distinguished Chair of Disability Studies and Professor of Anthropology at the University of California, Berkeley. So welcome, everybody. My name is Mariela Paulino. I am the founder of Project Hearing. I am also the advocacy and social media manager at Audio Eye, and I am a Hispanic woman. I have long black hair. I am wearing my signature shirt, which is a black shirt that says, "The future is accessible" with my handle. I am wearing very bright colored nails because I am in such a happy mood. And I am in my home office where we have different pieces of artwork and photos behind me. And one of my key pieces is one that we have here that says, "Complaining is not a strategy," because all of us here are all about taking action to make the world better. And my preferred gender pronoun is she and hers. And I'm going to pass the microphone over to my chaos organizer, visionary leader, transformative co-conference presenter, Adriana Malosi. Adriana Malosi, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Thank you. You were much nicer than I was. I am Adriana Malosi, founder of Puffin Innovations. We're an assistive tech company. I am a Caucasian woman, power wheelchair user, salt and pepper short hair, with a virtual background. Let's get right into it.
So I'm going to start with you, Karen. If you feel comfortable going ahead and making an introduction, make sure that you include the audio description of preferred gender pronoun. Go for it.
Hi, everyone. I'm so excited to be part of this program. Many thanks to Mariela and Adriana for organizing this amazing conference. My name is Karen Nakamura. I use she, they pronouns. I am a genderqueer Asian American, Japanese American woman with graying hair that's shoulder length. And I'm at my home in Oakland, California, on the occupied territory of the Hrichin and Ohlone people. I am wearing a plaid shirt, which covers the fact that I am actually in my pajamas because it's 7:45 on the West Coast, and thankful to everyone who are joining us from the West Coast at this early hour. And again, just really thrilled to be part of this.
Thank you so much, Karen. I want to pass it on to Charlie. Charlie, go ahead.
Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Charlie Carr. I'm a white male. I'm wearing glasses and a yellow checked shirt. I use he, him pronouns. And I'm in my home office in Massachusetts. Thrilled to be here. And I'm thrilled to join with other distinguished panel members. And a big shout out to the first Ally Conference. And thank you, Adriana, for the invitation.
So happy to have you here. Laurie, who are you?
Oh my goodness. Laurie Hanin. I am a Caucasian female, short, sort of wavy today, dark brown hair, with glasses, a black sweater. I'm in my work office, which is just a touch cleaner behind me than it would normally be. If I was true to self, I would have kept the mess, but I gave you a break. I'm going to just apologize in advance because I'm getting over a cough and a cold. So I will go on mute as often as I can to spare all of you from the sounds. And really so happy to be included in this, Mariella. I won't tell them how long we've known each other. It ages both of us too much. And just humbled to be here, both Charlie with Charlie and Karen. As an ally, I am just really, really so impressed by all of your work.
Alrighty, so we have a panel here, and we are just so excited to share each of the stories and knowledge that they all have to share with all of us. So I guess I'll start with the very, very first question for all of you, which is, can you share with us your personal experience with the disability rights movement and how you became involved with it? Laurie, I'd love to start with you.
Sure. Well, I've been an audiologist now for over 40 years, and the last 30, hard to believe, is here at CHC. Used to be the League for the Hard of Hearing, and it's really working here and working alongside many individuals who have hearing loss, working with our clients, working with our board, working very closely with a lot of members of the Hearing Loss Association of America, that I've really learned a lot about disability rights in general and specifically for people with hearing loss. That is the area that I certainly am the most familiar with. Tried to be very open about learning, not somebody individually with a disability. So I recognize that while I may think I understand everything that people go through, I know full well I don't, not at all. However, I am now the parent of a 10-year-old with autism. And through parenting him, I have, have had some opportunity to have, some insight into just what people with disabilities do go through. I think that because of all of the efforts of so many people in the movement, he and we have benefited. Things have gone well for him. He's in a wonderful specialized program in a community school, getting everything that he needs without a fight. And I recognize, I think now truly how important things are. We went to Disney World last year, which I don't know if that's good or bad for anybody, but for 10-year-olds it is. And through their disability access service, he was really able to experience it in a way that worked for him. We only had a few meltdowns. So I am really now personally understanding a little bit about what it's about. But I guess that's about it. But it's really as an ally that I guess I'm here and do my best to understand.
Thank you so much, Laurie. And you're not just here to understand, you're also here to share. You have so much to offer the group, and we're very thrilled to have you here. I'll pass it on to Charlie. So Charlie, same question. Can you share with us your personal experience with the disability rights movement, and how you became involved?
Well, I had a spinal cord injury when I was 14 years old, and I was paralyzed immediately on the spot. And that was in 1968. So there were no community-based alternatives for me to go to. So I wound up becoming institutionalized. And I was institutionalized for the first 7 years of that experience. And it was pretty horrific, to be honest. And during that time, I was not thinking about altruism or, doing for the greater good. I was thinking just about survival and how I was going to get out of that place. So a group of us inside and out of this institution worked together, and we created the Boston Center for Independent Living in 1974. And that was our way of getting out and into the community. We had negotiated something that was brand new called personal care assistance, so that we were able to get the physical assistance we needed. It was paid for by Medicaid. We negotiated housing. got a place to live, and we were off to the races. So I guess my personal experience with disability is basic, just what do you do in order to survive? What do you do to get out of that horrific place? And what do you do to set up the services in the community that you're going to need to live outside of an institution? And who then are the people that will work with you? Because it's a group effort, folks, right? To make that happen. So that was when I got out of there. It was 1975. And thank God I've never had to go back.
I'm just here snapping my fingers because Charlie, you are a voice. So excited to have you here. Karen, lastly, I'll pass it to you. Would you like for me to repeat the question or you got it?
I got it. Those are amazing stories. I identify as having psychiatric, neurological, and some physical disabilities. And that identification has taken a long time to come. So the ADA was passed in 1990, which is the second year of my college experience. And I didn't really identify as being disabled, although looking back now, it's like I wondered how I managed to do things. It was really only after I became a professor, and I was doing work in initially in deaf studies, because I was really interested in Japanese deaf people as a minoritized, queer and Japanese American person. I was really interested in deaf people in Japan, and so students were coming out to me with various disabilities in my classroom. And then for my second project, I started working with a community of people who have psychiatric disabilities. And living with that community really forced me to come to terms with my own psychiatric disabilities that I had really pushed down a lot, as well as neurological, intellectual disabilities, and really just caused me to revisit my whole life and identity in those terms. So it was a late coming out, and so then I got this great job at UC Berkeley, which has allowed me to really be on the forefront of the disability rights movement. And now I lead this lab at Cal where we're trying to combine disability, technology, and the community, and really center disabled people's experiences and knowledge there. I think often we're left as afterthoughts or just as an excuse. Hey, let's make this thing and include disabled people. And I want to make sure that we center disabled people and that we build the community to do that. And that's what I'm doing here at Berkeley.
And it's fascinating because in so many different stories, Berkeley is where the disability movement started. And so it's so awesome to have all of you here today. I know I sent each of you, or I know we sent each of you the questions for today's panel, and I really just want to go over here and over there, and just really explore each of your stories. But we really have a structure to follow. So I'm going to go ahead and just kind of go through the questions. The first question I have is for you, Charlie. You talk about this, just really living in the movement in the 1970s. And actually, Adriana, would you like to go ahead and finish that question?
You caught me typing in the chat for people. I'll let you do that while I type in the chat because I want people to send us questions in the chat.
Okay, let's go ahead and switch. So, I guess, Charlotte, in your opinion, what impact has the ADA had in the lives of people with disabilities, and how has it changed people's perception of disabilities, looking at the length of time that you've been in this community?
Well, yeah, it's amazing. So you think of the ADA, but you need to realize, we all do, people in the audience, that it's the first piece of civil rights legislation of any real magnitude since the Civil Rights Act. And when you look at the ADA and how it's constructed, it mirrors the Civil Rights Act from Title I all the way through. It starts with employment, Title II is public accommodation, and so on. So when the framers, Pat Wright and others, put the ADA together, it mirrored the Civil Rights Act. And why we did that as a community is because we always watched the Civil Rights Act play out, and we wanted what African Americans gained from the Civil Rights Act. We said, hey, that's what we want as a community. So we got it passed. It was very difficult. The perceptions of people with disabilities at that time, and to some extent today, are best out of sight and out of mind, and not in the community and up in people's faces. That's uncomfortable for many. But what I think is the biggest accomplishment of the ADA happened uh, in 1999, and that was the Olmstead decision. And the Olmstead decision basically says that people with disabilities, because of the ADA, have the right to live in the community, and the state has to pay for that right to live in the community. So all the services and supports that somebody needs as a result of this right are to be paid for by the state. So when LC versus Olmstead was eventually enacted by the Supreme Court, the floodgates just opened, and people with disabilities started pouring out of institutions, regardless of whether it was intellectual, physical, whatever disability it is. People started pouring out. States were freaking out because they didn't have the resources allocated to support us. So to me, the ADA was certainly a landmark civil rights legislation, but like all legislation, it needs to be tested and tried before meaningful change happens. And the Olmstead decision was and is that meaningful change. So I think that public perception of people with disabilities is slowly changing. It's moving away from a pity-based or out of sight, out of mind framework, and it's now becoming more of a so here they are, here's what they want, and how are we going to accommodate them? And slowly but surely, people with disabilities are assuming our rightful role in policymaking and decision making, and the things that Karen spoke about and Laurie. And so now we are in the position of influencing policies, influencing legislators, voting, changing. So I think we're being seen as a force, but oftentimes, depending on where you live in this country, a bother, to be honest. So I'd rather be a bother and living in the community rather than a passive person dutifully living in an institution.
Well, that is we're living history right now, Charlie, and I thank you so much for sharing that story. It's such an important topic of just really not settling, like not seeing this movement happen before, but knowing that you deserve something better, and just having that it's not the world we live in, but we're going to work with the world we live in and we're going to create that world. I am so happy that I heard that story from you, Charlie. Thank you so much for sharing.
My
Karen,
pleasure.
I'd love to pass that on to you. As someone in academia, you're probably familiar with this very history that Charlie is talking about. But I think you also have a little bit more of an insider's perspective on how this movement has evolved. I'd love to hear what you have to say on that question.
Thanks. I think the ADA is an amazing piece of legislation, but I think they could have consulted more Black and Brown people in the writing of it, because it has many achievements. The best, I think, are on public accommodation, especially in how it's embedded in building codes. So all new buildings now have access to it. But as every year I have my students do an ADA survey of their housing, and in a class of maybe 30 students, 2 students are living in a home where a friend with a wheelchair could visit, not even live, just visit, so that friend could go to their living room and use the bathroom. So 2 out of 30 each year, and those are the students who are living in the dorms that are the newer dorms. So even though public accommodations has been really great for going to the movie theater or to a hotel, and even then many hotels are still inaccessible in various subtle ways, right? The spa might not have a wheelchair lift, or the hotel shuttle might not take power chairs. In many ways, that's been a huge accomplishment. But where ADA has failed has been in employment, and many statistics show that employment has actually dropped in terms of percentage before and after the ADA, and there are many factors behind this. But the ADA did nothing to redress past wrongs, like all of the sort of embodied discrimination that are in people, the lack of education, the lack of building social capital. So again, it's very similar to the Black experience after the Civil Rights Movement. You get these rights, but there's no support to help people to fully enactuate that. I think it's changing. I want to end on a happy note, but every university is seeing an explosion in the number of students with disabilities. And I don't think it's coincidental that this is happening, in this period, 33 years after the ADA. It took some working, but finally all those kids whose parents were told, oh, your kid can't go to the kindergarten because they're in a wheelchair or they're autistic. Those kids got into the kindergarten, they got into the elementary school, they got into the middle school, and now they got into high school. And now they're coming to college, and we're seeing this huge wave of what we're calling the ADA generation of students. And for them, access is something that they have always assumed. But then they come to college, and college wasn't ready for that. Colleges have been really, really resistant. And so we're seeing this huge wave of students. And I think when they graduate and when they become the kick-ass activists, that they're going to be the ones who are going to lead. I think we need a new generation of leaders, ones who embody intersectionality, who see the disability rights movement in alliance with BIPOC movements and with queer movements and with the movements of undocumented people, and see it in terms of it's really great if you're very rich and you're disabled. There are certain benefits, but if you're very poor and disabled, that is an entirely different experience. And so we need to have all those alliances created, which is why I'm so excited to be part of this.
And then finally, Laurie, I'm going to pass that same question to you, and then I will pass it on to Gianna for the next round of questions. But Laurie, you're someone who has been in the industry for what previously was the League for the Hard of Hearing, now the Center for Hearing and Communications. You've seen an entire evolution of the ADA. What does that look like? Where is it going?
First, I just have to comment to both Karen and Charlie. It's so interesting listening to you. I almost forgot that I'm supposed to answer a question too. So I'll try to stay on top of it, but I'm already learning really a lot. It's interesting because the then League for the Hard of Hearing was established in 1910. And actually the story is it was established by a couple of friends whose friends of an individual who had lost his hearing. And couldn't get a job. And not a surprise in 1910. And Karen, as you indicate, maybe not so surprising even today, but then for sure, there was nothing. And he was talking about committing suicide. And they said, this can't happen. And that really is like the origination of our organization. And as early as, I think it's in the 1930s, there was a group that really pushed and got a New York City theater to put in some kind of listening device, which was, maybe minor for the time, but major because it didn't exist anyplace else. And when I came here, and I guess it was the early 90s, there was a group called, Marielle, you might have heard of this, ABC, or Advocates for Better Communication, that was a small, relatively small group of activists, basically people who had been clients of ours pre-ADA, whose job really was to try to push for effective communication for people with all degrees of hearing loss. And because that really is, for most people with hearing loss, that's the issue, is how do you access effective communication? And it can be kind of complicated because it's such a heterogeneous population, as many are, but what's effective communication for one person does nothing for somebody else. But in those days, what they did is they were instrumental in trying to get hospitals, to have some kind of access for people who were deaf or hard of hearing. And one of the things that they did that was great for the time is they actually created like this little kit that people could buy to bring to a hospital so they would have what they would need, a little amplified thing for the phone and a portable smoke detector and things like that. And it was really up to the individual to make sure that their needs were met, which if you think about, now post ADA, it's like, that's crazy. So when I look at that, I said, well, the ADA, for people who are deaf or hard of hearing has really done, a lot. And we sometimes, I think, take it for granted. We also still, even today, though, hear of either parents who are only, told about one method of communication over another, or, somebody who doesn't sign saying, not like this conference, but here's an interpreter. Well, I don't sign, or here's captioning. Well, that's not my first choice. But I think in terms of effective communication, that's where we've really seen great strides. We're approached now by hospitals who want to try to do better. And I think part of it is because they do care, and part of it is because they know it's the law. And there have been a number of lawsuits against hospitals from people who are deaf and were denied effective communication methods, or their families, are deaf and were not provided with effective communication or interpreters. And lawsuits, when a hospital loses enough lawsuits, they rally and try to do, the better thing. But we have far fewer complaints right now about better access in medical institutions, in hospitals, in medical centers, and in theaters, now. And again, I think, I'm not sure if it was Charlie or Karen, at least in New York City, there's a lot of access from a lot of advocates in terms of public accommodations, theaters, libraries, the subway stations are looped. And, there are a lot of individuals push really hard for things like this. And I think it's very easy to lose sight that this is New York City and we have a lot, and around the rest of the country could be eons, behind. But I think for people who have hearing loss, it's really the access to communication. I mean, you look at this conference and many conferences now, it's captioning exists. And whether it's the state of the art and the way it really should be with a live transcriber like you have, Zoom has automatic captions now. And that's really, I think, opened up, the world for a lot of people. And maybe one good thing that's come out of the pandemic is I think that the video conferencing platforms have really made things much more accessible for people with hearing loss, because they had to, and then they saw how easy it was.
Whoa. Wow. Adriana, I'm going to pass that second question to you because.
Yeah. Wow. All right. So this is Adriana speaking. So what we would like to know is, what role do you believe technology has played in advancing the causes of disability rights, and how it can be leveraged further? Who wants to take this first?
This is go ahead, Karen.
Thanks, Charlie. I just wanted to say one thing about the ADA that was also I forgot to mention, was that the ADA was really amazing in that it inspired the world to change too. And so, where I do work in Japan, we had disability rights laws, but they were more welfare oriented, and this notion of civil rights that the ADA instituted really helped to change how people organized. And then I was really fortunate to be in New York and at the UN when the UN Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities was being written, and just to see everyone from across the world like coming together and thinking about the rights of people with disability, and all these nations signing. And just as a side dig, the US refused to sign, famously, because we don't sign United Nations conventions, because we're too good for that. So the ADA has really, I think, helped change global consciousness. So it's been amazing for that. So for technology, I think technology has been really great in many, many ways. There are things that we can do and that we can't do. I think that part of the problem is that we are really limited by, part of the reason I created my lab is in so many ways we could be doing so much with that technology, but the community is really limited. Take like power chairs. Most power chairs are not waterproof, because Medicare doesn't require that. Medicare will say, oh, you don't need to go outside with your chair, so why should it be waterproof? They're not modular, so that disabled people could replace their own motor controller themselves or upgrade it, or many times they're locked down with the chair has additional features, but it's locked out, and the disabled person can't reconfigure it themselves, they can't hack it themselves, they can't open it up. It has a lot of linkages with other parts of our world where we find ourselves really hemmed in by the tech community and by insurance companies. It's not so much legislation, it's tech companies, insurance companies, Medicare. Those places are creating restrictions that make it hard for us to do the things that we want to. Everyone has created this little walled garden so that things can't speak to each other. And then technologists are making things without our input. At our lab, we like to make fun of every month, 3 weeks, someone will come out with, a media company will come out with this great story. Student in high school creates sign language glove. And, it's a glove that'll take sign language input and turn it into speech. And you can ask deaf people of the list of things they want. Sign language glove will never appear on that list. And no one ever thinks to ask, what would you want, a sign language glove? And then in the weeks that they don't have the sign language glove, they have, college student invents replacement for the white cane for blind people. And it'll be like a robotic dog, or it'll be like a laser cane, or, GPS enabled vest with like buzzies all over. And, you ask a blind person, do you want your cane, or which you're accustomed to, how it works, it won't break, it doesn't have to get recharged. You have different canes for different occasions and surfaces and places. You can get it replaced easily. Or do you want something you have to recharge that's not going to be waterproof, that's going to affect all your other senses? And so people are just making stuff without ever involving the disabled community. And that's where I think tech needs to change, is we need to be in the room where it happens, to paraphrase Alexander Hamilton.
Yes, this is Adriana speaking. Yes, I echo that. And I often tell students that when I lecture at our local university. Charlie, I would love to hear from you regarding this question.
Well, technology is amazing. It's an equalizer. It promotes equity and equality. And I think of technology in terms of the theme of this discussion having its roots in the ADA. So, for example, people that are blind had no access to banking. And as a result of a lawsuit, now people who are blind have access to ATMs and a number of other features that enable blind people to bank. Very much driven by blind people, demanded by blind people, lawsuit was filed by blind people, and voila, we've got banking now is pretty much standardized to accommodate people who are blind. So I think it's an equalizer, and it's a law that has legs. So, I think that we also need to think about technology in terms of us being able to live full lives. When I was first disabled, I had to be pushed everywhere. I couldn't do anything on my own. And it wasn't until a power wheelchair was made available to me in the mid 70s that I was able to drive my own wheelchair, and my quality of life and my access in the community was greatly enhanced, to the point now where I have a wheelchair paid for by my health insurance, but also by Medicaid, that allows me to drive with my head. And because my ability to drive with my arm has now become compromised. So the technology that we've got today, I agree with Karen, it's done in a vacuum quite a bit of the time, but it's also being done with people with disabilities being involved. I think of my friend Judy Heumann, who you all know recently passed. She had it down to a science. So MIT has a lab that does work on innovation for people with disabilities. And she had them down at her place developing a whole new mattress system. And I wanted that same mattress system, but they said, stand in line, because Judy Heumann is the one that is going to get first crack at it. So the more we are able to get ourselves involved in the academic community, in the legal community, and in the private markets, we can help to develop appropriate types of assistive technology. And I'll end simply by saying that the other thing that seems so subtle, but it's so huge, is, for example, Zoom. Zoom is an amazing breakthrough for people with disabilities that have difficulty with transportation. It enables us to attend meetings, work, and a host of other things that never existed before. So we need to think about everyday things that we take for granted, like this conference and my ability to participate, because and our ability to participate from the West Coast to the East Coast and in between through this platform. So it's an equalizer. It's allows for inclusion, and it's life-changing, honestly.
Yes, I wish I had known that because I'm at MIT all the time, so I might have to sneak in and see what they're working on.
Yeah, reach out.
Yeah. Laurie, would you like to chime in on this question?
Yeah, a little bit. And I think Charlie, it's a really good point. I think certainly in the world of hearing loss, technology has kind of exploded and helped people along the way. And some of it, I think, is where we've capitalized and kind of been it's been great equalizers. I think sort of relates a little bit to universal design, because there are so many things that have come about that have helped people with hearing loss that it weren't designed, necessarily with that in mind. I'm thinking, as simple as hearing aids, Bluetooth connectivity did not start, to help people hear better. But the reality is when you have a hearing loss today, that's the default. Hearing aids have Bluetooth connectivity. It allows for people who can so much easier access to listen to music, to talk on the phone. And it's not what the design was for. And texting, if we go back just to texting, hearing loss or not, there's no teen that talks on the phone anymore, whether they have a hearing loss or normal hearing. So, teens now with phones with hearing loss are absolutely, equal peers, equal to their peers with that, for good or bad, for whatever that is. And exactly Zoom. I mean, I think that the world, has learned through the pandemic. We're still on Zoom today, not, for, people who have disabilities and not just because, it's easier for one population or another. It's easier for everybody. And while there are certainly, benefits to being in person, for meetings like this, I can participate in so many more things cross country where, you wouldn't travel otherwise. And of course it's helped, since transportation is probably, I don't know about the last frontier, but certainly still a huge, hurdle for people. It completely eliminates that. And then in terms of accessibility with the captioning, and Zoom is probably the leader out of all of the different video conferencing. Most recently, I think it's only in the last couple of months now, if you want captioning enabled, you just do it. You don't have to ask the host to do it. So there's no disclosing, necessary. I don't think you should care about having to ask for it, but I well understand people don't want to do it. It's just there now. If you want to use it, use it. And it's really not bad. Well, again, a conference like this, a live transcriber is going to be much better. The Zoom captioning is pretty good, to have available all the time. So I think technology, really, it kind of ends up benefiting everybody at the end of the day.
This is Adriana speaking. Definitely. We did get some questions in the chat, but we do need to wrap up soon. I do want to mention one of the questions from Lee. And she said, does the ADA cover people in mental health crises? Karen or Charlie, if you want.
Yeah, I think for psych disabilities and intellectual disabilities, the ADA has been in some ways the weakest. Um, um, and technically it does, and it's supposed to. And we're starting to see it, especially again at K through 12, and then increasing in college that it has. But in the workplace, it's been very, very difficult in getting independent living assistant. It's been very difficult in getting deinstitutionalized. It's very difficult. There are HR companies that specialize in advising how to not include people with disabilities, what type of language to include in your job ads. So like you'll see in a lot of job ads, no driver's license required, aside with other things like ability to climb stairs or to speak and communicate clearly or lift boxes above your head that are 20 pounds. But the driver's license is huge one that excludes people with epilepsy, excludes a lot of people with intellectual learning disabilities, it excludes a lot of people with psych disabilities. And so there's this sort of specialization in how to exclude us. But there's now some really good kick-ass lawsuits happening around psych disabilities and neurological disabilities, and so I'm really hoping those will open things up. But it's really slow, and I don't like that we have to file a lawsuit each time for our rights. It's it's 33 years, for Christ's sake. Just give it to us.
Yes, thank you to all of you. I'm sorry we could be talking with all three of you for hours on this topic, but we do have to move on. We have a packed schedule today, so thank you, Karen, Charlie, and Laurie, for being here and discussing the history of the APA and sharing your wealth of knowledge and experiences. So thank you again. We really appreciate it.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll be in touch. Bye, guys.
Thanks to our panel members. Great group. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you to our sponsors, 3Play Media, Google, Matthew V. Jocelyn Fund, Audio Eye, and House of Possibilities. Captioning and ASL was provided by Steno Captions LLC and Partners Interpreting. The conference was hosted by Project Healing and Helping Innovation. To stay connected and continue your accessibility journey, follow A11y Central.com, the hub for accessibility, innovation, and community.